Now what we're going to do is we're going to get into the founder's view now. We're first going to talk about the founder's view on foreign policy. Okay, and then we're going to get into the founder's view on national defense, and then we're going to get the founder's view on war. We're going to get some interesting quotes from them. The founder's view on foreign policy, John Quincy Adams kind of has the granddaddy of them all. To me, this is a very, very applicable quote, a very true quote. He says this: America has abstained from interference in the concerns of others, even when the conflict has been for principles to which she clings. Isn't that an interesting concept? There may be these principles of freedom to which other governments are fighting or people are fighting, etc. But he says, even when the conflict has been for principles to which she clings, America abstains from interference, okay, in the concerns of others. He continues, she goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She is the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. She is the champion and vindicator only of her own. Now, that's a pretty powerful quote, but it's actually a pretty foreign policy to the current foreign policy that we have, isn't it? It's quite opposite. No, we don't go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. Well, actually, that's quite a bit what America is doing, finding different dictators that are bad and going out and policing the world in a lot of ways. Okay? Now, whether or not you agree whether that should happen, I'm simply saying that our current foreign policy is very much different than the original intent of our foreign policy according to the founders. Washington would agree. He says, Europe has a set of primary interests which have to us none or very remote relation. Okay? Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics or the ordinary combinations and collusions of her friendships or enmities. Okay, the history of Europe has been, boy, we're all entangled with these alliances. You're my friend, and if you insult my friend, then I'm going to attack you, and if you attack them, then I'm going to fight. And what happens, right? You look at World War I. That's exactly what happened. The killing of the Archduke Ferdinand and his wife by a rebel Serb in Austria. Next thing you know, we have World War I, right? Because everyone's connected. George Washington says, wait, those aren't our concerns. We shouldn't entangle ourselves with the imagination of artificial ties and these entangling alliances. Of course, there's a famous quote we're going to get to by Jefferson in a second that talks about that. Washington substantiates this and says, it is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. Okay, we're not going to associate and ally ourselves, make alliances with any portion of the world. We're an independent nation that is not dependent on anyone else. And other people's actions are not going to impel us to act a certain way. Jefferson says this, I deem one of the essential principles of our government to be peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Okay? So I don't know, hopefully you see with John Quincy Adams and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, they're very clear about what our foreign policy intent is. It's nice to get their quotes to understand the intent behind what they formed in the Constitution. We're going to get to the Constitution and find out where these principles, these ideas show up in the actual words of the Constitution, but it's nice to get that background as well. Okay? There's a man more recent, not one of the founding fathers. His name is Ezra Taft Benson. He was a Secretary of Agriculture under Dwight D. Eisenhower. He said this, kind of an interesting quote. There is one and only one legitimate goal of the United States foreign policy. It's a narrow goal, a nationalistic goal, the preservation of our national independence. Nothing in the Constitution grants that the President shall have the privilege of offering himself as a world leader. He is our executive. He is on our payroll. He is supposed to put our best interest in front of those of other nations. He continues, nothing in the Constitution nor in logic grants to the President of the United States or Congress the power to influence the political life of other countries, to uplift their cultures, to bolster their economies, to feed their people, or even defend them against their enemies. Pretty bold statement, right? But it coincides with this idea of Washington and Jefferson. No entangling alliances. We're not going to get involved in that. Okay? We're not going to uplift other people's cultures and economies or fight their enemies for them. It goes along with the same idea of our founders. Okay? One thing that's tied into that is foreign aid. An interesting fact, interesting thing to know, in 2013, America sent $37 billion overseas in foreign aid. Okay? With about 100 million taxpayers in America, that equates to about $500 per taxpayer being sent overseas to take care of uplifting their economies, bolstering their cultures, right? The things that Ezra Taft Benson talked about. I just want to break down who are the top 5 countries that are receiving foreign aid. Israel receives $3.1 billion. Afghanistan, $2.3 billion. Pakistan, $2.1 billion. Iraq, $1.7 billion. Egypt, $1.6 billion. In the billions. We talk about billions all the time. It's not a big deal. Billions is a big deal. It's a lot of money. We've given that much money overseas, okay, in foreign aid. And you look at these countries and you start to, wait, there's a pattern here. Some of those countries we've had conflicts with. Some of those countries we're giving foreign aid to, and they're not reciprocating anything. In fact, they've been our enemies in some cases. Okay? I'll let you make the tie there. There's some interesting money issues when it comes down to that foreign policy and the war that goes along with that and the money that could be made or lost. Okay? That's for you to kind of tie together.